Vogue Training would like to acknowledge that we are hosting this online event from the lands of the Turrbal people. We also acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands on which you will work today, and the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people participating in this online event. We would also like to pay our respects to the elders both past and present and celebrate the diversity of Aboriginal peoples and their ongoing cultures and connections to the lands and waters of Australia.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Assessment Reimagined, the Future of Design and Delivery in VET. And our presenter today is Miles Aravindhan. Miles is a Customer Success Manager at CloudAssess, where he drives platform adoption and successful implementations across the customer lifecycle. With more than a decade of leadership in the education sector, Miles brings deep expertise in RTO quality management and compliance. It's great to have you here, Miles.
Oh, good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me here.
If you want to go ahead and share your screen for me.
Sure thing. There we go. It should be on the same slide as before.
Yep, perfect.
And yeah, so good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here this morning. It's a beautiful Tuesday here in Adelaide, 25 degrees, just why I like it. I'm not a tropical person, so I can't handle the heat in this country sometimes. So today is a good day for this. So I was thinking about this topic because it stems back to a lot of what I used to do in TAE, especially around assessment design. And apart from the training side of TAE, where I was training assessment design, helping colleagues in the RTO with assessment design, to me, I think this is possibly the most technical task that's required for any vet practitioner. So anyone who's delivering a program or designing a program or helping design a program, training and everything else makes sense, but assessment design seems very complicated and it seems to get the best of us most of the time. And the question really from this today's session's topic, really, the future of design. What does the future of assessment design look for us now? So let's get into this. So maybe in the next 40 minutes, we can get an idea of what we can do. So we'll start off with a Slido to help build some ideas for the session. And you can always throw comments into the chat. I have the chat flying next to me at the moment, so there's a lot of comments in there already. So be involved, get involved, throw your ideas in there, and I'll be able to bounce off them as well. So we'll start off with the Slido, which is a word cloud, basically. So go ahead and open your camera on your phone and scan the QR code. Your camera will pick up the QR code and send you to the Slido link. And this is the question that I would like to start us off with, just to understand what most of our attendees deal with and what they consider the main hurdle or main part when designing an assessment tool for the vet sector. What is it that catches you out? What part do you stumble over? What part makes it tricky? So go ahead and scan that QR code and see if you can start answering this particular question. We've got a few participants already typing. That's really good to see. And yeah, just throw out one word or two words, something that every time you do an assessment tool, you trip over or is unclear or doesn't quite apply, anything really, just to gauge the room to understand what is it about assessment tools. Oh. We've got all chats running right now. We've got this running and we've got the chat running. That's good to see. We've got a few people putting some comments into the chat. Validation by Connor, validation by Louise. Industry requirements, that's a good one too. So let's see what the word cloud looks like so far. Wow. So mapping, front and center, mapping. Oh, who doesn't like Excel? Excel's great. We can map away and it looks so neat and tidy. Wow, mapping, getting started. I like that one from Emily. Getting started. Where do we even start? Which is actually a really good question. Part of this session actually talks about the structure and the order of it. So a lot of this comes together. So we've got compliance, validation, time, suitability, goodness. I'm going to take a picture of this. This is the most feedback I've ever received from anything. There we go. That's awesome. But I think we can start seeing a pattern here. The pattern seems to be when designing vet assessments, making it compliant and ready for audit. But then we also see the time needed for building it in the first place. Interpretation, that's a really good one too. Interpretation, sufficiency, quality, knowledge, standards, varied cohorts. That's really good. I'm really glad someone brought in the learners. We can be so involved with building the assessment tool that we often forget who it's for. And the standards, the whole reason the standards exist is to protect the interests of the learners. But assessment tool design pulls us away into such a world of compliance that we have to tell ourselves to come back and remember, who is this assessment for? So let's move through the next couple of slides. These are some great responses, guys. Thanks very much. Competency-based, not graded, learning styles, student focus, mapping, cohorts, AI assistants. I like, Craig, you said AI assistants. You've given the show away. So the question then becomes, how can AI assist us with vet assessment design? And this is a big question because ever since AI came into the scene, we've just catapulted ourselves into it, thinking that it will do the job for us. And we really underestimate what's needed to use AI effectively. And it's not a mystery, it's not a secret. It simply works by understanding what the current issues are when using AI. So when we do use AI, we can make up for this. So context comes up frequently. Context that the unit of context or the assessment in context or the activity in context. Context is possibly the most expansive word behind any sort of task that we try and do, especially in the vet sector. Every unit, every training product, every training package, context is key. The second issue that we find when using AI is that it has no understanding of experience. I sometimes see AI as a really intelligent child. It can understand concepts, but has no understanding of what it's talking about. So it can speak so confidently about things, but not understand what it really matters in the real world of things. So the AI lacks that experiential factor that comes with only from experience. So trainers and assessors out there, assessment designers out there, they have experience of the industry, experience of the product, experience of the topics. That's the part that we bring in. The lack of vet understanding. So vet is one of the most technical sectors I have ever worked in. And it is braided with policy and framework and organizational procedures. It's endless. How can we even expect AI to understand that when we're still trying to figure it out? Half our job is figuring it out. So we can't expect AI to suddenly magic its way through this. So the lack of the vet understanding is a true issue. And then the last one that often catches people out, but they don't realize how important this is the structure required to use AI effectively. So quite often, I've seen this with a lot of clients. They've jumped straight to the end. They've just opened AI and said, build me a knowledge assessment. hoping that AI can fill in the gaps that we haven't filled in for it. So this structure that's required when using AI is how we help it get to the point where it can give us something that's usable. But how much structure, how much understanding, how much experience, and how much context is actually underestimated on all fronts. So something that I'd like to give everyone here today, so everyone that's attending this webinar and anyone who's actually seeing it afterwards, they can also have access to this too. I'm not that mean, they can have it too, is to give you guys a tool to use straight away. So assessment is evolving. Are our assessment tools keeping up? So the new standards demand quality more than compliance. They say quality is what we're pursuing now, which I think is fantastic. Compliance, I don't know. In my mind, I always saw compliance as the bare minimum that was needed to avoid prison. Compliance was different to performance. So quality is a much better mindset. It reframes us and says, let's pursue quality and performance of our tools rather than making them as bare bones as possible. So I prefer this mindset, and the new standards bring this mindset forward. And in the next few years, we'll see what happens with this mindset. It takes time in the vet sector. The application to the workplace has been emphasized more so than before. Evidence is even more required now, especially with the rise of robust LMS solutions. So learning management systems out there that make the acquisition and organization of evidence immediate. That also means that we're also expected to maintain those systems as a standard. But in terms of assessment design, though, our methods still seem relatively unchanged. Just from my observations and my experience, I've seen that the way we build an assessment hasn't changed. And I have a feeling that this was passed down many generations of TAE development and delivery as we all went through the various Cert 4s. So the Cert 4 in training and assessment was taught by those that were often the students of it. So assessment design, I remember, was one of the weakest parts of the TAE, the Cert 4, because it was the most complex. And surprisingly, the TA delivering, or the trainer, was often not too versed on that either, because of how technical it was. So let's look at this a different way. Is there a way that we can build an assessment tool that utilizes AI in the way that seeks to its strengths, and then we can fill in the gaps of where AI struggles? So can we use something to assist with this? So the idea for this session, the idea behind this is using something called GPTs or GEMs or agents if you use Copilot. For those not too sure what this means, a GPT or a GEM, depending on which platform you use, ChatGPT has things called GPTs. Google Gemini has something called GEMs. Microsoft Copilot has something called agents. They're all the same thing, essentially. They're all AI assistants. And in order to use an AI assistant effectively, you need to program it. And it's text-based, so you don't need to be some sort of software engineer for this. You could simply prompt the AI, the GPT, to function and operate in a certain way. But this is where the first lesson comes in, is the amount of information needed for a GPT to even engage with assessment tool design. Think about everything that's in your head already about assessment tool design, and imagine transcribing that in a way that's structured, contextualized, experiential, and aligned to vet policy. Think of that wealth of information. we need to educate the GPT to do that first before it can produce anything close to an assessment tool. So to help with this, I've actually created this. And this you can download at the end of the session. It's a template to help with building this in the first place. And the template itself goes through this exact topic that we'll be talking about for the next 20 minutes or so. And it helps you structure the whole GPT process with the prompts required for it. And throughout, you put in your pearls of wisdom. So explain what this means, use your industry experience. For this part, same thing, working your way through the template to build out your GPT or gem. And then at the very end of all of this, there are the instructions for using this. And if we have time today, because I can digress really easily, if we have time today, I'll show you how to use it in real time because I've got what ready. So that's our goal today, is to work our way through this understanding so that when you download this template, you understand how to use it, how to apply it, and how to make use of it for assessment tool design. So let's head back to this and let's look at the sequence that's needed to achieve this. And this is our fundamental goal, is to use the best of both worlds, to use AI for its immeasurable ability to comprehend and synthesize, but we want to control that with your understanding, your knowledge, your experience, your expectations. Those are what govern the AI, and the AI will do what it does best. It's creative. It can process data very quickly. It can synthesize data very quickly, but we need to train it. We need to position it in a way where it can be useful and help reduce the time needed for assessment tool design rather than add to it. There's a few people saying in the chat they can't hear me. Hopefully check your sound settings. There's a little microphone. Thanks, Cynthia. Thanks for confirming that. Okay, so let's keep soldiering forward. Disclaimers. Like anything in this world, there are disclaimers. Because you are using AI, then your oversight is essential. So if you use this blindly without oversight or validation or expertise, then you are accountable for what happens afterwards. So it expects you to be an expert of this field in order to guide it, to adjust it, and those are expected. No AI is faultless. No AI can simply produce something that is perfect, especially when it's as complex as assessment tool design. So it's an expectation to give it advice, course correction, just to make sure the output is accurate to what you want it to be. So there are 7 steps. Step number 1, context. So if we look at any unit of competency, and I've got one that's here. This is my example, purely from my experience. This is a unit that's very familiar to me. Every unit has the same composition. There's an application, there's elements and performance criteria. Sometimes there's explicit foundation skills, but then some training packages don't have that. CHC, I remember, don't have this list here. The foundation skills are implicit in the performance criteria. All that means is that there's a bit more work involved. Assessment requirements, performance evidence, knowledge evidence, and assessment conditions. And occasionally some units, I think the air conditioning units have range of conditions as well. Range of conditions might be part of it too, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. So the very first part of any unit is the application. And the application decides or explains in its very brief way what the unit applies to. The problem with this sentence, or these two sentences, is that they're very vague. There requires an explanation to help AI understand what this means. So it's not as simple as just cutting and pasting this into the GPT. Now, that's part of the step, but the second half of that step is more important. The second half of that step is explaining to the GPT what that means. So here's my example. This comes from the same unit. And the context needs to be explained afterwards. So this is where your expertise comes in to explain, what does this application even mean? So plan, prepare, and facilitate. What does it mean to facilitate? In-person delivery mode, customizing. What does customizing mean? What does an entry-level trainer and assessor have to do? Reviewing own practice applies to entry-level vet trainers and assessors. Explain that. Explain entry-level. The word itself, don't assume that AI understands what this means. A term as simple as that can be very, very expansive in definition. So go ahead and explain what that means based on your understanding, knowledge, and experience. And the goal is to leverage both the detail in the units and your experience and understanding to explain it. So that's the first step, context. Illustrate the outcome of the unit. The relevance of the assessment starts here. This is how you can explain to the student why they're being assessed. Because as elementary as that seems, the student doesn't often know why they're being asked a question or why they have to do a task. And that alone can make the task or the question really confusing. There's almost a vacuum that the assessment lives in. But the application is our first way into relevance. And explaining this relevance to the GPT will translate into the tool that eventually happens. The tool will become far more recognizable, relevant, and the learner will almost want to pursue it because they see that it links to their future goal. Adult learners need this above anything. Otherwise, they just switch off. And I'm no different. Unless I can see why I'm doing something, my mind is somewhere else. So I need relevance as much as anyone else. By the way, if you haven't noticed, given the spirit of today's session, we let AI design the rest of it. So there you go. It did a pretty good job in the end. So that's step one. The application of the unit of competency is the context, and it needs explanation. The next step is where it diverts from current traditional assessment design practice. Most often, when anyone designs a unit, I'm not saying everyone, but I've seen this very, very, very common, very frequently, people work their way down the page, which is completely logical. They start up here and understand the units, then they go to performance criteria 1.1, then 1.2, and they just work their way down the page, which is, well, it's a way, it's a method. I prefer something that's a bit more creative, and interestingly, being creative reduces the workload required. So the next place to go is not the performance criteria, it's actually the foundation skills. And the reason why we move to a different part of the unit of competency is because we're trying to build the structure of coherence for the GPT. And we start with the widest aspect, and we work our way down to the final aspect, which is the learners. Because in the end, that's the most important part for our GPT to understand. So application is the broadest sense for the unit. Foundation skills describe the behavior, but again, we can't be okay with just what the unit of competency says. So facilitates training in a style appropriate to both individuals and groups. That's a pretty vague sentence. So this list, even though it seems quite specific, is still quite vague. Uses main features and functions of digital tools. Like what? What digital tools? What functions? This is, again, where your experience comes in to pad this out. So for that next part of the GPT instructions, simply copying and pasting this alone isn't enough. We can try, but the output will be quite inaccurate or unsuitable. So this is where you can kind of look at it and say, okay, based on your understanding of this, what does this mean? So this means that. That's how your paragraph should start. Oh, there's a great comment there. Let me find my own unit. Go for it. Go and find your own unit of competency, and you can track this process in real time. That's awesome. Thanks, Dr. Avishek. I love the engagement and proactive approach of that. So don't assume that what's on the page is enough for the GPT to understand. It's a great start, but you need to interpret this. And that was actually one of the words that came up in the word cloud is interpretation. And gosh, interpretation is its own webinar in itself. But we're only looking at this in the context of one unit. Just for this example, one unit of competency. What does this mean in the context of one unit of competency? This unit of competency. What does numeracy look like in the context of this unit of competency? What does problem solving look like in the context of this unit of competency? So the more you can bring your experience and industry knowledge into the GPT, the more suitable this will be. And the assessment tool at the end will align with all of this. And that's not to stop at any implicit foundation skills up here as well. These ones here are explicit. These ones here still carry implicit skills. So the more you can put in, the better. Detail is your friend. The more detail, the better. And you can always go back to your GPT and keep adding to it. So it's not a once and then done kind of process. You can go back into it, add more detail, add more guidance, add more understanding. And that way it understands this part in a real sense. So after the foundation skills, after we've explained the skills, the behaviors needed, and so on, the next step, interestingly enough, is actually the assessment conditions or the range of conditions. So this represents the boundaries of the assessment tool. And that comment that I made earlier, how people work their way down the page and build the tool, quite often I've seen the tool disintegrate because they've reached the conditions and realized, oh, we need to do this. And they go back and unwind their tool to accommodate it. So this means that the boundaries of the tool need to be established before we build the tool. We need to understand our limitations. We need to understand the rules of assessment, the conditions of assessment, should I say? Rules is a different word. So the conditions of the assessment, is it supervised? Is it unsupervised? Is it both? Okay, if it's both, which parts aren't supervised? Which parts are? Which parts are simulated? Which parts are workplace? All of that needs to be explained. So simply cutting and pasting the assessment conditions is part one. Explaining it is part two, and that's the really important part. And it's this, again, this assumption that the words on the page, learners requiring face-to-face impersonal vocational training, training and assessment strategies required for training, don't assume that this sentence makes sense to the AI. Always go in there saying, okay, this is what the unit of competency says. I need to explain this on top of it. I need to guide it, explain it, contextualize it, link it with industry, illustrate it with examples, and so on. The illustrations, examples. Those are really important. Without that, the AI will just wander away. And you can't blame it because you haven't given it enough context, enough experience, enough understanding. So as we work through each of these steps, we can see that we're building the information required for the assessment tool to eventuate. And too often, if assessment tools are, in a way, built in a void away from everything else. And this next one is really important because, again, this is a difference of philosophy. And my understanding has always been that summative assessment is always in the context of training. So there's a few types of assessments. There's diagnostic, that's LLM assessments, formative assessments that appear during training as a reinforcement tool, and then summative assessments that lead to a competency judgment. And a long time ago, my operations manager explained to me, I was building a few tools for a business course, and he said to me that the assessment tool needs to be understandable to someone who didn't attend the training. And I don't know, I didn't understand that. I was like, why would the assessment tool need to be written in a way for someone to understand that didn't come to training? Who's the audience for this tool? And strangely enough, if you write a tool that's understandable for someone who didn't attend the training, it actually becomes really confusing for the students that did come to the training. So assessment can't be out of sync with training. Assessment has to echo it. Assessment is the yin and yang of training. In the learning idea, training and assessment go hand in hand. Without assessment, the training can't be finalized. And without training, the assessment is meaningless because why are we assessing them? So this continuity between training and assessment needs to be there in order for the learner to recognize the assessment. Otherwise, the assessment, as it says there, it appears in a vacuum outside of it. And the one thing I was never short of in my time in the RTO was student feedback. Gosh, the students were very vocal, comfortably, which is great. Made my life easier. And that was one of the biggest things that came up. They said the assessment seems disconnected from the training. And the training is awesome. 10 out of 10, aces. It was funny. It was engaging. It was all sorts. And then the assessment appears, and it's this cold, disconnected experience that intimidates the learner rather than helps them grow and explore their learning. So this actually might be a new consideration for some, but to show there's a continuity between training and assessment, which means the performance criteria that help outline the training of the unit, that needs to be explained to the GPT saying, this is what the training involved. These are the activities we did to reinforce it. This is what the learners are expected to do, and this is the level of competency standard that we expect. The training needs to be seen in the assessment. They need to understand that, okay, this assessment question or task, oh yeah, that's part of that training session we had. We did some practice around it. I can see this in the assessment. That's what this part is talking about. It's about showing that continuity between training and assessment so that when the student reaches that stage of assessment, the assessment is still part of the same story. And this is another webinar that I've got lined up for another time, which is narrative-based assessments, story-based assessments, which is a way to build an academic journey and experience for learners through a course. But this part here, the performance criteria, that's the next stage where you come down and say, this is what the unit shows in terms of performance criteria. But again, the performance criteria needs to be explained. Add specific details regarding the training for this unit. The ideal assessment tool echoes the training for the unit of competency. So that way it becomes recognizable and just an extension of the learning process. Again, that's a philosophical debate. I believe in this. I believe that training and assessment are connected. They're two sides of the same coin. And there was a higher success with learners that were able to identify their training and their growth of competency in the assessment and then be able to cement that in the assessment. Step 5, which is the final step of building the GPT, not the final step of building it, the final part that really matters is your audience. So up until this point, we've simply translated the unit of competency. We've injected it with experience, understanding, examples, illustrations. We've helped humanize a very static page. So this page that has a lot of words, we've injected meaning into all of this. So the last step is to bring in the audience. And this part here really leans on your ability to understand your learners. And whenever this question came up in TAE, when we were training this, the students often struggled with describing their learners. And it doesn't have to be a complicated process, just any patterns you recognize through your cohort. So in this case, I would write that my students are time poor, but they have a wealth of industry experience, so lean on that. They are between the ages of, I don't know, 25 to 50, and their technical experience needs to be contextualized in the assessments. So what are their assessment requirements? Lean to their industry strength, use common language, highlight vet jargon, because vet jargon is half the puzzle with this particular course, and make the assessment tool humanized for the audience. And again, the more detail you can put in here regarding your learners, the higher the probability that the assessment instruments that are created are in fact learner focused. Without this last instruction, everything up until this point will produce an assessment tool, but we'll never know if it's actually good enough for the students until we try it. The idea is to embed that instruction into the GPT, so when it's building the assessment instruments, this is a key consideration. So this order is quite important, and the first page of the template explains the order, the purpose, the application, foundation skills, and so on. So now that we've reached this point of training the GPT, the next step is using it. So in that same template, there are prompts that you can put into the GPT that are broad enough to use immediately. You can always go back in and tweak it, add details, add conditions. You can always update and evolve this. Actually, in fact, I hope you do. This template is purely a template. Please expand and evolve this. Make this yours, make this your document. This is yours, you can have it. So make it so that what the output is exactly what you've asked of it in the first place. And this is where it comes in. It's the creativity of AI is unreal, and the way it easily puts together ideas and says, let's do this and this and this, and based on the information, let's do it here. The strength of your instructions will increase the strength of the knowledge assessment that it creates. And from there, look at it, inspect it. If you remember our disclaimers, inspect it to make sure that what it provides you is what you want. And if it isn't, say so. Say you've missed the knowledge evidence. Please expand the knowledge assessment to include this knowledge evidence. Or that task is unsuitable for knowledge evidence too. Please refine it in this way. your ability to adjust the assessments will contribute to the accuracy and the success of the tool that comes out of this. Similarly, if we look at the template and see, where is it? There it is. This is the prompt for knowledge assessments. And similarly, there's a prompt for performance assessments. So that's the next part. The GPT will help you draft a performance assessment. And it will do that with all of that knowledge behind it, the context, the foundation skills, the boundaries, the assessment conditions, the training of the unit, so the performance criteria, and your audience. And your audience is the most important part. So the GPT will draft this for you and again, adjust it, course correct it, be critical of it, saying that is not correct. Please refine in this way. There's so much information behind this GPT. Once you get to this point, there's so much information in there. It will cut corners. So being able to see where it has, course correct it and say, that needs to be there, please revise. And these two axioms, knowledge is the acquisition of understanding and performance is the application of understanding, those govern the objective for each instrument. So what the purpose of assessment is being captured. So these are the 7 steps in one slide. And how are we doing for time? Well, we're not too bad. We can keep talking. This is a new way of looking at things. Interestingly enough, you don't even have to use AI for this method. You could just use it now without having to use AI. The order of dissemination from a unit of competency, you can do the same thing to build a normal tool and break down the unit in that order: application, foundation skills, assessment conditions, performance criteria, and then the learners before you move to the assessment requirements. But each of these brings in a very specific part of it. It brings in relevance, human behavior, boundaries, what happened before the assessment to bring the learner to that point, their characteristics and needs, and then the system will endeavor to build this for you. And your goal is to tweak it, refine it, shape it, make it usable. So what you get out of this GPT is a usable tool. Interestingly, this process is only lengthy in terms of explanation. Once you've understood the process of doing this, the time it takes to set up a GPT using this structure is actually really quick. So the one that I have as an example, I'm just going to quickly hop away from this page for a second. So where is it? It's somewhere here. I'll see if I can find my GPT. I use Google Gemini, by the way, so it's called a gem. There it is. So having this ready for your assessment tool design requirements. So one gem, or GPT, equals 1 unit of competency. Having this ready means that we can now start using it. So let's start with this question and see what it says. This helps clarify anything that's sitting in the knowledge base for this particular GPT that it's already confused about. Oh, actually, I want to change this to thinking instead. We want to use a more complex model. The fast model that it defaults to isn't as robust as the thinking model. So depending on your chosen AI, so ChatGPT, I think, calls it complex. Google Gemini calls it thinking. I'm not too sure what Microsoft Copilot calls it, but there'll be something similar in there. Use the more complex AI model because we want it to think a little bit more than just a quick answer. while I'm waiting for this, wow, the conversation in the chat has been going off. Wow. Are students allowed to use AI in Australia? I don't think AI is banned here. Social media is, interestingly, but AI, I don't think so. Yeah, I like this one by Gavin. I would not cut and paste only. Make sure you contextualize it more and reword to suit your needs. Relying on AI is just like relying on someone else to do the work for you. It's always good to check and double check. I like that. All right, so the first question, the GPT already has a few questions for us. So let's see. Before I proceed, I have a few brief questions. So answer number one, they will use their own context. Answer number two, distinct events over time. Yes, keep it agnostic. Done. So now it'll begin phase one, which is drafting the tool. And it'll start with the knowledge assessment. Actually, it'll start with both, but we can correct and adjust both. Oh, look at that. It's bringing in mapping. That's nice. Oh, it's suggested mapping anyway. So far, so good. AQF level 4 is working. Using multimedia as evidence. So again, this is the GPT trying to instill authenticity in the tool. So rather than written responses, it's moving towards multimedia responses. I can already see a little gap there, so I can say this now. Revise knowledge assessment to include KE9. That was missing from before. So this is the course correction that's expected because it's trying to compute so many moving parts at once. But it's doing a great job. Like it's actually bringing out something that's coherent. It's pretty workable. It suits the learners to a T. It's clear. It's not bogged down by terms that are unsuitable. It's condensed it to a level where my learners, in this particular GPT, I've explained that my learners are significantly time poor. So it's making sure the instruments are usable for students that are full-time. Oh, it's done a rubric. Outstanding. So each one has been given as a rubric, and now you can export this off the platform. Now that the knowledge assessment is finalized, would you like me to proceed to the performance assessments? Yes, please. And as a note for anyone out there, just be polite to AI. If anything that movies have taught us, it probably started by someone being rude to AI. So be nice. Less chance of Terminator 2 happening, I guess. Turnitin crashed in its first week. I never knew that. All right, so now it's building our performance assessment, 3 sequential training sessions. So it's spot on. That's exactly what the unit says. Required evidence. Oh, it's done it in tasks. That's awesome. And it's linking it back to everything. Sequential group, individual sessions, learner progress, learner difficulties. Outstanding. This is exactly what the unit and performance evidence asked for. But it's managed to bring it together in a way that's really concise, clear, well instructed, Vet, if anything, is notorious for over-instruction. So keeping it nice and clean and simple, this is great. And the rubric, the checklist, that works. That works. That's correct. That's correct. Yes. So let's proceed to the phase 2, which is mapping it. And mapping it is done after verifying everything. So let's give it some time to map. Oh, this is great. The chat's awesome. Wow, a lot of hate for Turnitin. I've never used it personally. So yeah, always double check AI mapping. That's the tricky thing with AI. Because of how confident it sounds, it's easy for us to be tricked and go, oh yeah, it's he sounds pretty confident. He sounds more confident than me, so it must be right. That's the thing. You need to unlearn that. Confidence is different to accuracy. So it requires us to be critical for it. So far, so good. Yep. It hasn't conjured anything, which is great. It's informed by everything that's in its knowledge base. It's informed by the policy documents that it has to go by. It's mapping the whole unit. Export to sheets. So now that the mapping has been built in this way, it now creates that spreadsheet for us to use, which I think was possibly the biggest word in the word cloud that we started with, was mapping. And again, this is where you can be critical of it. You can go back in and isolate various parts and say, oh, well, based on our experience, that particular question doesn't quite capture that particular criteria or evidence. And you can tweak it afterwards. But the goal is for AI to assist us to get to a point where we can impart our understanding and experience. The legwork doesn't have to be us every single time. And in fact, looking through these instruments, there are things in there that I wouldn't have thought about. Really creative ways to capture evidence, knowledge, or performance. And this is what we want from AI. We want AI to be the creative part of this, but we want to control that with our understanding, experience, education, and so on. Yes, please. Go for it. AI can't always appreciate, but can't express when it can't complete a task. Yeah, true. AI will try and answer regardless, even if it's the worst question in the world. It will give it 10 points for trying. Okay, so now it's creating our instruments, the final versions of instructions, observation checklist. We can export each of these as needed. Mapping. Would you like me to generate a separate downloadable exec? No. Thanks anyway. But that's a quick demo of the GPT. Once you've finished programming it, it requires very little in the way of adjustment, but adjustment will definitely be in there in some way, whether it's by language or by suitability or by a gap that you've noticed, or perhaps you yourself want a very particular task and AI has decided a different way. You can say, actually, I want this to exist in the tool, so can you please rework it in there? But no, this is a great test of that GPT. And we were able to conjure an assessment tool into existence in the space of 6 minutes. And then we can spend the next 20 minutes arguing about it as a team. So that won't be covered in today's webinar. Today's webinar is just about this. But yeah, go ahead, see if you can grab that. You can start using it today. One thing we didn't talk about is clustered tools. So that would be a really interesting thing. If you guys can reach out to us via email or anything that works, LinkedIn, that works too. Let me know what the foray into clustered tools look like from this perspective of creating a GPT that can handle the horsepower required to understand what's needed for a clustered tool. How does that work? What were the pitfalls? What did you have to do and change? I'll find that awesome. It'd be interesting for me, so let me know. But apart from that, the next session will actually be in the delivery side. So today was design. The next session will be in delivery, and we'll ask the same question. What role does AI have in the future of vet assessment delivery? And it's this, again, this idea of finding a consolidation between AI and us. How can we make the best of it and be educated enough to use it in a literate way? AI literacy is a term now, and AI literacy happens through sessions like this. Go ahead and scan our QR codes for Cloud Assess as well to see how we can bring this assessment tool to life on our platform. We are working with clients every day for that matter. Assessment is our bread and butter. So the creativeness and what we can do on the platform is unlimited, really. And let's see if there's any questions in the chat. Gosh, there was a lot of stuff in the chat. Let's have a look.
Miles, I did jot down most of the questions. I'm pretty sure I got them all. Would you like me to read them out to you?
Yeah, go for it. Go for it. Voice from the sky, go for it.
So this one was from Susan. How do we create assessments that genuinely assess our learners' knowledge and understanding now that they can use AI to provide their answers? We need to know how to create assessments that learners can't just chat GPT the answers.
That's a good question. Okay, so rather than doing the easy one and saying, check out this other webinar, because there is one for around that, the 10-second version, move away from the idea of policing students and move towards the idea of creating assessment tools that require authentic evidence. And it can be as simple as the way you frame a question. So, for example, if I ask you a question, what are 3 reasons for customer complaints? That question doesn't require the learner. It just requires Google, let alone AI. If we reframe the question and say, in your experience, describe 3 reasons for customer complaints, illustrate your response. The learner doesn't actually need to go anywhere. The answer's in their brain because the question has been reframed in a way where it doesn't encourage them to run away from the question. It actually encourages them to run towards it. So they say, oh, actually, in my experience, there was delay on food orders, there was inhospitable service, and then there was inaccuracies in billing if you billed someone the wrong amount. And straight away, the learner hasn't run to somewhere else to find the answer. The question was framed in a way that asked the learner to look inside themselves and ask themselves, what is this answer based on my experience? So that little analogy explains assessment tools need to be reframed in a way that seek unique evidence. And that's one example of experience. Another example is using the training. So based on the activities we did in class, do you agree or disagree with this? And that particular type of question can't be answered by AI. It can try. Again, AI will give its hardest to answer the question. But the question itself is not written in a way which is devoid of the learner. It's written in a way that's speaking to the learner. So the learner, again, this goes back into their mind. If they have no work experience, but they do have experience of the training, again, this is why assessments have to be designed in the context of those that were trained. Writing an assessment for those that weren't trained, this simply doesn't make sense to me. That's, again, pulling away from the requirement for the learner to use, let's go to AI and ask the question. it's easier to answer it themselves. It's actually harder to use AI to answer that question. So that's that's the small kind of steps taken in a tool to move the whole tool away from AI. Just those little text points saying, think back to this day when we did this. You all did this and we did this. In the context of your industry, what are three things that you think were suitable and three things that you think weren't suitable and why? So it requires so many levels of personal inference. And that particular question isn't more complex from an AQF perspective. It seems more complex because we're bringing prefix and suffix to it. But in the end, it actually asks the learner something that's already in their head, rather than them going, okay, where else can I find the answer to this so I can move forward? Again, another part of this big puzzle is relevance. If the student doesn't know why they're being assessed, then they have a higher chance of just running to AI to answer the question so they can move on. And I think that's a big part of any training, is to not just look at the assessments and talk about the assessments, but to diffuse the assessment. The trainer is the best asset for this. They can diffuse the assessment in a way where the student sees it as a part of their learning and rather this intimidating, uncomfortable step of inquisition. And those intangible ideas are how we move tools away from AI and towards the learner again, willingly. Sorry, that answer went on for ages. So I don't think we've got time for any more questions, but anyone who's happy, you can always reach out. You get some stuff after the session as normal. And yeah, reach out anytime. I'm always happy to chat. I'm always happy to hear ideas. I'm always happy to hear what you think. I love the vet sector. I think it's fascinating. It's an endless puzzle. So bring it all in. I'm always happy to chat.
Thank you, Miles, and thank you for presenting that great session. You will receive the recording and your statement of attendance 24 to 48 hours post-event. Please check your junk and spam if it is not received. But in the meantime, have a great afternoon, everyone.